Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with Chief Conversationalist Thomas Senna, featuring Matt Ardill and special guest Robin Duke. And now, curator of the hall, JD.
Thank you so much, Doug DeNance. It is an absolute privilege to be here with you all on this lovely Monday morning, if that is when you are listening to the podcast, that is. Maybe it's Tuesday where you are. I don't know. It could be Wednesday. Will somebody stop me before I say Thursday? It's JD here, and we're at the SNL Hall of Fame, ready to go on in. My keys are jingling. Gonna shut off the alarm. I'm gonna ask you one thing. Wipe your feet before coming inside. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair where each episode we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity in the hall. And that's how we play the game. It's just that simple. If you want to reach out, please do so. The SNL Hall of Fame at gmail.com. That's the SNL Hall of Fame at gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Just connect. It's pretty cool to do. We also are in the midst of a ratings drive. Our book is going to come out, the advertising book is going to come out soon. And so we want to get as many people listening as possible. So please share, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you get your delicious podcasts from. You know, there's a lot of folks that say Eddie Murphy saved Saturday Night Live. And while I don't think that they're wrong, somebody that really gets overlooked in all the Eddie hype is, sort of the Robin to his Batman, and that is Joe Piscopo. Matt, what do you have to tell us about Joe Piscopo today?
Hey, JD. Well, he is 6'1", born June 17th, 1951 in Passaic, New Jersey, where he then went on to grow up in North Cadwell, attending West Essex High School, where he was a member of the drama club, and developed a reputation for never playing a character as it was written on the page. He was inducted into the New Jersey Hall of Fame in 2013 for his services to the arts, and he's won an Emmy for a cameo on Law and Order. He has 35 acting roles, 6 credits, 6 writing credits, 4 producing credits, and one of those credits is honestly for the most important film, one of the most important films of all time, Johnny Dangerously.
Okay, expand on this.
It's just one of those films that is a perfect piece of satire. I think it landed a bit too late, but it is a satire of the sort of gangster movies, and it's him and Michael Keaton in way too much eyeliner as 60s gangsters. I love it. Or 30s gangsters. I love it. Go and watch it. It is hilarious. One of his other roles is actually an interesting one. He plays the comic, teaching Data how to be a comedian on Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Are you kidding me? Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think they were originally looking for like an old Borscht Belt comic, and it didn't work out. So they went with him, and he's playing a very much a sort of like a Rat Pack, not Rat
Gotcha.
Pack, different generation, a Rat Pack comedian, sort of given that sort of very, well, he's known for his Frank Sinatra vibes. He brought that to the character, and it was fun. It was
fun.
good. Yeah. Now he's actually mentioned in the Tom Petty song, in the Heartbreakers song "Jammin' Me," in one of the lyrics. He is an interesting character physically. He studied Wing Chun martial arts under Alan Goldberg and actually fights Chuck Norris in the film Sidekicks, which, I mean, yes, he is a very physically imposing fellow, but to me, that is like when Bruce Lee fought Burt Ward on Batman. It is just not a fair fight in any stretch. In the 1980s, he developed a passion for bodybuilding, where, and he became described what you could describe as swole or possibly yoked. He appeared on the cover of Muscle and Fitness magazine in 1988 and 1990, discussing how he felt at the end of every workout, it was a personal victory, setting a new bar for swole comedians that I don't think has been matched up until maybe Joe Rogan. I think he's kind of come close to that since. But he, like you mentioned, he and Eddie were really close friends, to the point that Eddie Murphy bought a house in the neighborhood where Joe Piscopo lived just so they could live close together. So they were really tight. And now it was in Billy Joel's music video, Keeping the Faith, which is sort of kind of poetic because he got his start actually as a DJ and a dinner theater performer at the beginning of his career. And now, later in his career, he is doing the same thing. He really, really likes Frank Sinatra, to the point Frank actually introduced him on Solid Gold in the 80s, where he did an impersonation of Frank Sinatra singing My Way, but which has then turned into a career. He now does dinner theater and performances with a tribute band to Frank Sinatra, touring across the world, singing Sinatra songs. And his other current gig is as a DJ, hosting Piscopo in the Morning from 6 to 10 on 970 AM in New York, as well as multiple other radio shows. So his career in many ways has come full circle.
Yeah, it sounds that way. Very good. Well, we're always excited with our special guests nominating candidates, but this week we're really extra excited because we have an actual SNL alum nominating Joe Piscopo, and that is his castmate, Robin Duke. So let's go right down to the conversation room right now, Matt, with our friend Thomas, who is with Robin Duke. Thanks, Matt.
All right, JD and Matt, thank you so much. And yes, welcome to another edition of the SNL Hall of Fame. And I am so excited for today for multiple reasons. First of all, we are talking about an era that I absolutely loved, the Ebersol era. Great era of SNL. And today's nominee, Joe Piscopo, part of the Ebersol era. And joining me to talk Joe Piscopo and other things throughout that era, we're celebrating the Ebersol era today. I couldn't think of a more perfect guest to join me. She was on SCTV in 1980 and 81. You may have seen her recently on the Simon Rich series, Man Seeking Woman. She had a bunch of fun appearances as Wendy Kurtz, the owner of the boutique shop on Schitt's Creek. And I'm bearing the lead, because she's a former SNL cast member, joined for the final episode of season 6 and was on the cast until the end of season 9. I'm talking about Robin Duke is my guest today here at the SNL Hall of Fame. Robin, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thanks for having me. This is lovely. What an honor for Joe.
Yeah.
And why not me? Why wasn't? No, I'm kidding.
Say we'll get to you. Yeah. It's a committee. It's a lot of times it's out of
that
our hand.
committee.
I know. Well, I'm going to have to write a strongly worded letter to that committee.
Please do on my behalf. Great.
Yeah. So, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. My wife and I totally loved when you popped up on Schitt's Creek. Like, you and Dan Levy had such fun chemistry on that show.
Didn't we?
It was wonderful. My wife was so excited.
Well, I've known Dan since he was a baby. So it was very, they had to keep stopping me when we were filming, because instead of calling him David, I would call him Daniel.
Oh,
and so they would have to cut and restart so that I would call him David. And I did it constantly. I'm sure I cost them a ton of money in retakes, but
I kind of blame, they should shoulder the blame for that. The names are so similar. I don't know. Exactly. I would get confused too. Yeah. How was that going back to work with Eugene and Catherine and seeing seeing Dan? See, I just did it all grown up. How was that going back to work with them?
Well, it was great. I mean, sadly, I didn't get to work with Catherine, who I've known forever, but I did have a little scene with Chris Elliott and Eugene, and that was always fun because I'd worked with Chris Elliott on Groundhog Day.
Yes.
So we were back together, and then of course working with Daniel was fun. It was just very easy. I'm his mom is one of my best friends, so he knew that he had to be nice to me.
Yeah. As someone who is a big SCTV fan, of course, big SNL fan, when you popped up as Wendy, I pointed at the TV and I nudged my wife and I was like, she was on SNL. I love her. I'm so happy she's on here. So yeah, that was a great turn. Is there anything that you have in the works right now, Robin?
Right now, well, I have a all-woman sketch comedy troupe, and we've been together about 20 years, called Women Fully Clothed, and we are getting back together after COVID to perform, in theaters. It's a stage show. So we're getting back to do that, what are we calling it? Our first farewell tour. That's the name of it. Our first farewell tour. So that's what I'm working on. And also I've been working on a book that called My Funny Life and Improvising Through It, which I've written, and now I'm just doing a couple of rewrites in order to, go out there and get it published.
Huh.
So that's been a huge project for me.
Well, I'm so excited, and I know our listeners just devour books by SNL folks and comedy people in general. So yeah, I'm so excited about that. I didn't know that. So that was like good news. You broke some great news.
Yes, it's new. I just have to get it published.
Yeah,
but
that's the trick.
I'll come back, when I'm whatever, and I'll come back and pitch it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that stage show sounds awesome. It might be like an Elton John, like a farewell tour for years. I don't know. Like,
well, yeah. Well, did I say we'd been together 20 years?
20,
Yeah. So, yeah. No, we'll have more shows.
Well, we'll be on the lookout for that. That sounds awesome. Today, we're here discussing Joe Piscopo's SNL Hall of Fame candidacy. But as I mentioned, I want it to be like a celebration of that era in general. I'm really excited to get into those years with you. Someone who was really important to the show back then, Robin. I want to set the table a little bit for our listeners, kind of put us in the context of that time. So Lauren left as a producer after season 5. There was a huge overhaul of the cast, and Gene Dumanian took over as producer. Gene was let go. In came Dick Ebersol, who was instrumental. He's actually instrumental in helping Lauren create the show in the 70s. I hope our listeners know that. When Ebersol took over, some new cast members were added for what ended up being the final episode of season 6. That was Tim Kazurinsky, Tony Rosado, your friend from SCTV, Laurie Metcalf, Emily Prager, and Robin Duke, yourself. So I'm curious, like, how did that go? How did you go from working on SCTV to then being hired on Saturday Night Live?
Well, initially Catherine was going to do it, Catherine O'Hara, and she decided when she got down there that she didn't want to do it. So she called me and said, they're looking for women. Come on down. So I flew down and I met with Dick, and we were hanging around. I think he said something, I talked with him for a bit, and he said, go out and meet everybody in the cast were there, and he said, go around and meet the writers. And then we were there, Catherine and I, for about 2 hours. And then finally Catherine said, come on, we got to go, go and find out, get an answer from him, because we've got it, we've been here 2 hours. So she said, go up and knock on his door and say you want an answer. So I did. I knocked on his door, asked him if he had an answer, and he said, yeah, okay, you're in. So that's how I got there.
I bet he appreciated the kind of go-get-him attitude.
Maybe that was it. It's like, was so cocky, and I've never been like that again in my life. Oh. But he said yes, and that was it. I didn't have to audition. And then that first show, I have very little memory of. I mean, when you said that Laurie Metcalf had done it, it was like, oh yeah, I better look that up. I better go and watch it.
She did like a little Weekend Update bit. I don't even think she was in studio. I think she did a little pre-taped bit and that aired on Weekend Update. And then that was her only appearance on the show. So it's a little fun bit of trivia for SNL fans that Laurie Metcalf was actually on the show for an episode. Yeah.
She's so good. Oh my God.
Yeah. She's really great. Tony Rosato was someone who you had worked with, right? So like a familiar face in the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at Second City in Toronto, we'd worked together. So I'm sure he was campaigning for me as well to do the show. So that was great that I had him there as a buddy, and made fast friends with Tim. Well, that cast was just, we were all very friendly. Mm-hmm. We were all so excited to be there. And so it was a nice cast. We got along. There was I don't think there was any bitterness or anything like that between the cast. We all supported one another and liked one another.
Yeah, that's so good to hear. And a lot of you guys went from, season 6, the last episode of season 6, to carried over to season 7. Joe Piscopo being one of them. He was one of the few Dumanian originals to actually carry over. So you and Joe, it seemed like such fun chemistry. And I know the first thing, of course, that probably a lot of people like to talk about is the Whiners. Like, can you tell us like the genesis and how that was working on the Whiners with Joe?
Well, that came about because Joe and I were walking around, on I guess it was a Tuesday night when everybody's up late writing sketches, all the writers, and nobody was writing for us. So we started, commiserating and whining that nobody, and then we started whining in these voices. And then I thought, oh, what a great idea for a sketch. So I went home that night and stayed up and wrote it down on foolscap, the scene, and I handed it in. In those days, you didn't have computers, and you had to hand your sketches into the production assistants, and they would format it and type it up and photocopy it. And then on Wednesday before the read-through, you would come in and there would be a stack of scripts for the actors, for the writers, for the producers, and I got my stack of scripts, and I didn't see the Whiners in that stack of scripts. So I went to the producer. I said, why aren't the Whiners in the read-through? And he said, well, they there were no laughs. There were no jokes. And I said, well, it has to be heard. You have to listen to it. It's in their character. So he agreed to put it into the read-through, and it just went ridiculously well. And of course, it was put up on the board, and it became, I think, for Dick Ebersol, the first recurring characters in his, while he was, what do you call that? His leadership.
Exactly. Did you have were there any thoughts of like, oh, this could become recurring, or was it just like one sketch at a time kind of thing?
No, it was one sketch at a time. And in that first year I had written the Whiners, and I had written a couple of other sketches that made it to air. So I wasn't being hired as a writer. So the next year I submitted all these sketches that I had written to Dick as a application or whatever to become a writer. And he couldn't say no. He couldn't refuse to hire me as a writer. When at that point I'd had so many sketches on the air that he had no choice.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was very successful at read-through. Of course, the interesting thing was when we got to the set and we were rehearsing it, the joke was, it was also our voices, but the joke was in the reactions of the people in the restaurant. Mm-hmm. So my thing is always about the laughs are in the reactions.
Sir? Excuse me, sir. Excuse me! What? Our headsets aren't working.
Well, you have to plug them in.
Well, don't kick the china.
All right, I won't kick the china. Just let me put... Here. Give me this. Plug it in.
Oh, thank you. Kiss the day goodbye and point me towards tomorrow. Wish me luck.
They weren't having the people in the restaurant leave, which is what I had put into the sketch, that as it builds, people were leaving. So I had to, fight for that. I had to go to the director and the producer and say, why aren't the people in the scene leaving? And they said that it was too complicated. I said, well, that's where the scene is. That's what makes it funny. They gave in, I guess. Good.
For the best, it's
for
your
it's
your vision. Yeah, it's your baby. You know comedically how things should go, right? Yeah. I'm glad you advocated for that. That was one thing that really, definitely one of the things in that era that stood the test of time. I'm curious, like Joe as a scene partner, how was he as a scene partner, and like starting to work with him, like when you joined the cast, what was that chemistry like with Joe?
Oh, well, Joe was just, he was friendly and warm and funny, and he was just very supportive, and whenever I've heard an interview that Joe has done, he's always been so supportive of me. And I've always appreciated that. He's always mentioned me, and he's always been so appreciative of us and working together. So he was great. I mean, he's so professional and prepared, and he knows how to. He knew how to, like Eddie. Joe and Eddie really knew how to play the camera.
Yeah, that's a good way. That's a really good way to put it. And I was going to ask you too about Joe and Eddie and their chemistry. And you were in a sketch, a really fun sketch that I saw in season 9. It was a Dion's sketch, Dion's Salon. So you played a character who's kind of having problems with her husband, and Dion's kind of doing your hair. And you become kind of attracted to Dion throughout the sketch.
Oh, God. Oh, gee.
Yes. And so that was you, Joe, and Eddie in the sketch.
Carlos will will be very interested to hear about this. What are you doing? Look at me when I talk. Look at me. Do you want to look at me?
Blair, you don't understand. This is not what it looks like.
Well, I see what I see, and I see AC instead of DC.
Well, girl, you got it all wrong.
I was just trying to get him to do what God intended a man to do.
God intended me to cut people's hair, not sex ladies down. Don't make me read you in here.
I feel faint. I feel faint. Dion, I thought I knew you.
What did you notice about working with both of them and kind of their chemistry too? Like that was a fun thing that you did with them.
Oh, well, they loved each other. I mean, they loved to make each other laugh. The two of them. They were, they were a team and they just enjoyed each other. And that was the thing about the cast, was everybody liked one another and you wanted to make each other laugh.
Mm-hmm.
That was what was so great about that cast. And certainly, Joe and Eddie just wanted to the point where Ebersol wanted them to break up on camera.
Oh, okay. So he kind of, because I know Lorne, especially in the early years, would say like, "Oh, this isn't the Carol Burnett show. We don't break." But that's kind of interesting. You say that about Ebersol, then.
Yeah. No, he encouraged it.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed at the end of that sketch that I was referring to that when they cut the sketch, the camera kind of faded back, and you can see Eddie and Joe kind of like messing with each other and making each other laugh. So it seemed like that was there, and you were a big part of kind of that trio in that particular sketch. That was like you added a fun kind of sauce to that.
I love those guys. Like I just loved, I loved to play with them. That was the thing, it was play with them. Not that it was with everybody else, but yeah, it was a different energy and chemistry, definitely, with Joe and Eddie.
There was one sketch, I don't know, maybe when I describe it, it might jog your memory, but it was one that they titled like Christmas Sexual Innuendos.
Oh!
You remember that? So
I think I wrote that one.
Okay, yeah. So there was one moment in particular that I'm really curious about. So there was some eggnog that was in Joe's glass, I think, and it spilled.
I added some rum.
Remind you of anything?
And your reaction, the audience's reaction, it made it seem like it was an off-the-cuff kind of comment by Joe. I'm curious if it was, or if it was something that's something he would do.
Golly, I really wish I could remember, but I don't think I would have written that.
Yeah, it really seemed like a natural off-the-cuff thing. Like, does that kind of sound like his? Yeah, does that kind of sound like something that Joe might do?
Oh,
just
totally.
To kind of,
totally. He would find the humor in something or the laugh. He would, call attention to it. That was certainly in that scene something that you couldn't just let by and ignore it within the context of what the scene was about. So it was great. It was great. It was just perfect.
It was such a quick, snappy thing to say. I love how the sketch ended. Like it got to a certain point and Joe said he had to go because, I'm all talk. So I got to go because I'm really all talk. So
that was a fun scene. That was really fun.
Yeah, it was really fun to watch too. Just one of like the honestly like so many memorable moments from that era and from like you and Joe specifically. But that's one that really stood out.
Oh,
so.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, and I wrote that. I'm pretty sure I wrote that.
That was really well written. I could definitely tell. So working with Joe, like day to day, like what did you observe about him? Maybe as a comedic performer that was like that maybe the audience didn't get to see. Like what's something you would want SNL fans to know about Joe as a comedic performer?
Well, Joe, I remember, sitting in front of the television. There was a lobby. It wasn't a lobby, like a foyer or whatever, outside of Dick's office and all the admin offices. And there was a television. And Joe would sit in front of that television. I guess he didn't have one in his room in the first,
You had to earn it.
They could have, splurged. But
Sure.
anyway, but it was like videotapes, putting in videotapes, and he'd be rewinding, to do an impersonation over and over and over and over and over, which to me was so admirable and so great about Joe, because he wanted it perfect, and he was a hard worker on those impersonations. He took it seriously, and that was his milieu, to do impersonations, and he just went 100% with it. So that I remember with Joe, like, just so professional that way.
I think it showed,
I had
too.
to do an impersonate. I never did.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever did one. But Joe was just, he would study it. He would study and study.
Yeah, like with his Sinatra impression.
Thank you very much. You're marvelous. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. This is Francis Albert reminding you that it is time. It's time that for all of us to start buying and driving American cars. Recently, I visited the Motor City, and I have to be quite honest with you that I did not like what I saw. Capiche? Thousands and thousands of beautiful guys and chicks out of work because you are not buying American cars. Now, I'd like you to meet one of the guys that America forgot.
Like, I can tell that was a studied kind of thing, and he looked up to Sinatra. I think there's some funny kind of like anecdotes about how Joe would say he wouldn't want to do something because he didn't want to offend Sinatra, or Frank wouldn't like that, or whatever. So
I don't remember that, but that's pretty funny. He
really,
that.
Being from I guess as a kid,
What, the chairman? He doesn't
right.
want to offend the chairman, of course.
Yeah, he wouldn't want to do anything to offend. And then there was a whole sketch written about like what would Frank do, and it was because Joe would say, "Well, Frank wouldn't do that." No, I know Frank, he wouldn't do that. So. And his Andy Rooney, Ronald Reagan, David Letterman, like they seem real studied.
Hi there, welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my, what a fine show we've slapped together for you folks here tonight. So, wake the kids, phone the neighbors, come in from the lawn. This is one you won't want to miss. Right now, let's say hello to Paul Schaefer in the band, ladies and gentlemen. How are you, Paul?
Gosh, so hard worker Joe, just a great, as far as just like, was he somebody, maybe even going back to the Whiners or other sketches that you did, like a kindred spirit or comedically, or was this something about him that you saw and said, I can work with this person?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Joe was, what's the word? He was confident. And, I guess it was, particularly when I was writing, I would want to write for Joe because he would, he delivered. He was a good partner. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I wanted to work with Joe because he was so dependable, reliable, fun, knew how to deliver the jokes, and the reactions. So we got each other. I guess we just kind of, there's that element too. But I think the whole cast, that was the beauty of that cast. Everybody got each other. We were all on the same page, sort of shared the same comic sensibility.
So one thing I wanted to ask you for sure about your work on the show was Mrs. T, which is something that I always remembered.
Shut up, old man. Shut up.
So they had like the first one was like that Bloody Mary mix. Like so where do you like kind of conjure up something like that? It was so much fun to watch you just like let loose, and you did it with Mr. T too. So what's the story behind that?
That was the very first impersonation of Mr. T.
Was it?
Ever. I had gone with my friend Liz Welch, who was the talent coordinator at the time. We took off one afternoon to go see a movie. We saw Rocky III. we came back from Rocky 3, imitating Mr. T or Clubber Lang the whole way back to the studio, the 18th floor. I went in immediately and said to Dick, you got to get this guy on the show. His name's Mr. T. He's just fantastic. And he said, Robin, nobody knows who he is. So he just shooed me out of the office. No, we don't know him. He has no TVQ. We don't know who he is. So a couple of months later, Dick came to me and said, your boyfriend's coming to be a guest on the show. Write something up for him.
Yeah.
So I wrote up Mr. and Mrs. T's Bloody Mary mix, and that's a real thing. The Mrs. T's Bloody Mary mix, it's called. And so that was just a simple, straightforward commercial parody with me talking like Mr. T, playing Mrs. T.
If yours means me and my husband, Mr. T, you should be drinking Mr. and Mrs. T Bloody Mary mix. I pity the fool that doesn't drink it. I pity the fool. Isn't that right, Mr. T?
I pity the fool.
Now, if you want a real Bloody Mary, you come to my apartment tonight. I'll show you a real Bloody Mary. You hear?
She showed me.
Chill out, old man. Let me finish. The strategy for a real Bloody Mary is 3 parts Mr. and Mrs. T Bloody Mary mix to 1 part vodka. Then you drink it down. That's me.
And he had no lines in it. I think he had one. But I had written down all the things that he had said in the movie. And I pity the fool was the one that I kept repeating. And that became his signature line.
Yeah, that's like exactly. I know that's his like trademark.
And it was me. And if I had a nickel, I tell you.
You should have, trademark or something. If in the 80s that wasn't.
He'd never been impersonated before.
How did he feel about being impersonated?
Well, that's a good story too, which will be in my book. But he was coming in as a guest, not as a host, which wasn't usual. So I had written up the piece. Eddie had played Mr. T at the read-through. It got in. Then on the Thursday when we were on the floor rehearsing, the 2 producers, I think it was Bob Tischler and Barry Blaustein, came down to the floor, grabbed me and said, Mr. T is here. We want you to walk him through the sketch. And I was in shock, like, well, why me? Like, I know I'm supposed to do it with him, but are you saying he hasn't read it? No, he hasn't read it. He doesn't know what it is. So they introduced me to him, and he's Mr. T. He's got chains and the mohawk, and he looks like Clubber Lang. He looks like he does in the movie. And then, so those guys ran off, introduced me, said, Robin's going to read the sketch with you. They ran off and hid behind a flat on the 8th floor. And I was left alone with Mr. T, having to do an impersonation of him, nobody ever having done him before. So he had the script, I had the script. I just put my head down and was like going, I pity the fool. Shut up, old man. Shut up. You come to my apartment tonight, I'll show you a real man. And then I pity the fool who doesn't drink Mr. and Mrs. T's Bloody Mary mix. I went on and on and on. And then he said something at the end I can't remember. And then there was a pause. And all I heard was, you're a funny lady.
Oh, that's great.
And then he went upstairs. Those 2 guys came scurrying back like the 2 rats that they were.
As a performer, is that almost kind of like an exhale? Like, okay, good. Like, he's on board.
Really? Yes. As I say, like, who knew how he was going to react to that? Mm-hmm. They didn't know. That's why they fed me to the wolves,
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah. It seems like that's part of his thing, though. Like, he never took himself too seriously, and it's probably why he was able to maintain the Mr. T thing and make a good career out of it. And you helped usher that in.
I sure did. I sure did. And then But then after that, Barry and David, who were the two head writers, any Mr. T that happened, Eddie would do, and they took on the writing of it. I think there were a couple of Mr. T's that happened after that.
There was like a birthday special or something too.
There was, there was a Christmas special.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. So anyway, that was
turned recurring.
Pardon?
I said it turned recurring, so people really enjoyed that.
It did, but I didn't write it. It was taken over by the head writers, which happened to the Whiners as well. They took it over.
Oh, okay.
They took over the writing of the Whiners because guest hosts would come in and want to do a Whiners sketch. So,
yeah, I recently saw we did an episode on Danny DeVito, and he was in a Whiners with you guys, and you're right, like it's how they play off of it. And it seemed like a ramp up, and so like they were trying to be patient, and then all of a sudden, like the patience was worn thin and stuff. So it seemed like you had to have the right guest host to play that.
Yeah. But you know what the difference was that the initial Whiners, if you listen to it, they really aren't complaining. They were just saying things, but with a whiny voice. But subsequent to that, with the other writers, they sort of played into them being whiny and complaining, whereas initially they really weren't. So that was the difference.
Kind of a slight tweak from the intent. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Exactly. Like that. Yeah, definitely got that. There was another fun moment that you had that was a really memorable episode from the era, but when Drew Barrymore hosted, when she was just a tiny little girl, and you did like a sort of a spoof PSA. It was just you and Drew on the stage, and you did kind of a spoof PSA about being a woman who chose a career over having a baby and all of that, and you were kind of bouncing stuff off of Drew, and she would give snappy comeback.
Yes, that's right. I've opted for my first priority in life to be myself. But I want to have a baby. Just to concern myself with a sweet little creature rather than my own petty problems like, do I have enough lines in the show this week? Or why aren't I doing films? Or are my thighs too big on camera?
Robin.
Yeah?
Your thighs do look real big.
So just like having Drew there as a little girl, like what kind of experience was that, trying to do a show with a 7-year-old host?
Well, I'll be honest with you.
I
had just had my wisdom teeth out.
Oh.
So I was out of it.
Oh my. Okay.
I can barely remember that because I was just in pain and on, just trying to get through it.
Yeah. So that night, it did seem like Tim Kazurinsky sort of was the one who kind of babysat Drew through a lot of the night. So maybe he could have like helped you out since you had your surgery. Maybe Tim could have helped you out through that night too. I don't know.
Nobody would help me.
Oh,
no.
no.
I'm kidding.
Well, that was really fun. I can imagine working with the 7-year-old host. There has to be some concessions and some tweaks to.
Oh yeah,
to that. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. So I have to say my memory of that is pretty, blurry.
Yeah. But understandably so. I've had my wisdom teeth taken out. Understandably so.
As an adult, it's.
Oh gosh.
It was so painful.
Oh no.
It was really painful.
You also had a distinction, and not many cast members get to do this. It was really neat when Howard Hessman hosted. You actually did a cold open. You did a studio tour.
Yes, we did.
That was so cool. How did that come about? You don't see cast members do that, Robin.
And also, one studio is on this floor and the other is on the 3rd floor, which means taking elevators, running around, having to be in the right place at the right time, faster costume changes, twice as many crew members, and everybody here is going crazy. It's a technical nightmare.
Hey, how many times do I have to tell you, writers, huh? I want funny whoosh. This is not whoosh. Like this Musketeer sketch, I don't hear the laughs, all right? Hey, look at me when I'm talking to you. I'll rip your throat out. I demand whoosh material. Understand?
Hi, Ed.
Hey, Robin, did the Hessman cat show up yet?
Well, that's reason number 2. Our guest host, Howard Hessman, hasn't arrived yet, so we've got a few minutes.
I'm wondering, though, too, part of that was that you were working in a new studio because of election coverage. So, like, do you remember having to switch studios?
No. No, that's a good one. I should watch that again. I don't remember that. I have a feeling that I wasn't happy about it or something. That I didn't feel like it was a good performance or something was off. So it's one of those ones that I may have blocked out of my. That's the thing, you know, when you do it's not like you can redo it.
Yeah, that's
it's
true.
Live.
Yeah.
So when stuff when you just don't feel on, or it just doesn't, the timing or something was. I spent probably because we were moving around like that it was.
Yeah.
It was a difficult one, but.
I got to say, as an SNL fan, it's really neat seeing like a cast member being able to give a little studio tour and take the lead and do all of that. So that was like a nice distinction.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah. Yeah, of course. You brought something up interesting, though, about it being like a live atmosphere. And whenever I have a lot of friends in my life who try to compare SNL, they know I love SNL, so they compare it to like Key and Peele or SCTV or something like a more of a pre-tape sketch show. So I'm curious, you worked both of them. So like, can you relay the difference for some folks between doing a pre-tape sketch show and a live show like SNL?
Yeah, well, it's interesting for me because my background is stage, and that's where I always have felt the strongest. It was hard for me at SNL to get used to the camera. I kind of always wanted to push the camera out of the way. I wanted to go directly to the audience. So I liked Eddie and Joe. You know, they just ate the camera up, and the camera ate them up. And that's for them to accomplish that I was so impressed with that, but I never felt comfortable with the camera. SCTV, you had a little bit more preparation for it, and you could do retakes and fix it on the floor, and then do it again and play with it on the floor. So that was the difference between the two of them, was just the ability to keep working on it as you went along and make it better.
Yeah, I always describe to people as the week of the show. And as far as I know, a lot of the production and how the show is prepped has been the same for a long time. But I always describe it as like a high wire act.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of from the German of an idea to getting it on the air. Is that like maybe an apt description?
Yes, definitely. Definitely. I mean, it is. It's all like, so much of it is energy, and so much of it is sold with energy. That energy of being in the studio and all of that just contributes to the laughter and the success of it, for sure, I think.
Yeah, you could really feel, when I watch SNL, I always felt that really like live vibe in that live atmosphere. And I love comedy, so I loved SCTV and I love a lot of pre-tape sketch now, but there was always something about that live aspect.
Yeah. Have you been to the show?
About 2.5 years ago, my wife and I were able to go to a dress. We went to a dress rehearsal, and I got chills when I walked in and looked down on the studio. It was almost like I had to pinch myself, and I admittedly like teared up when I walked in.
I'll bet. Yeah, I know how you feel. I mean, and the feeling in that room is so different, isn't it? I mean, It is electric.
Yeah, and it's a little smaller than people might think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I went, last time I was there, when was the last time I was there? I think I went to see Eddie's Christmas show.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, I was in tears. And yeah, it was like so, just the memories flooding back. But I was going to say it was just that, you feel like you're just in the middle, like you're in New York and you're right at you're right in the heart of the heart. It's so exciting. I wish I had that appreciation when I was doing it.
Yeah.
You're just kind of young and, cocky and, well, this is what I do. I'm going to do this forever.
You're professional, trying to like stay in the moment sometimes and make sure you're doing the best that you can. So yeah, no, sometimes it takes like some time away from it to get some of that perspective. Now you put it so beautifully, and it's just how it is to be in that studio and see the show and everything like that. We're kind of at the time of the show where we're kind of doing the advocacy part. We advocate for the nominee and for everything like that. So we have voters listening, and we have our SNL water cooler folks listening. So I'm curious, like, why do you think SNL fans should appreciate Joe Piscopo and your era in general as an important part of the history of the show?
That's a really good why. Once again, it's his professionalism. It's his attention to detail that Joe brought to the show. His ability to be in the moment and deliver and understand where the joke lay and how to deliver it and still remain loose at the same time. That's what was so great about Joe, like the example that you gave about him, the eggnog falling on him that was Joe, deliver and be and is there and strong and so quick with that. I mean, that's Joe. That would be the best thing about Joe, was that ability to, in that moment, deliver that line rather than let it go, pass by. He was there. He's in the moment, committed and in the moment.
So there's that. How cool is that, really? This is our first dalliance with an SNL alum. Other than that time Bill Kenny, doing research for his nomination of Robert Smigel, befriended Mr. Smigel, or Mr. Smigel befriended Mr. Kenny, I should say. Pretty cool. Speaking of Mr. Kenny, we're going to have some cool news to share with you in the weeks to come as we approach the final season of the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. That's right. Season 7 will be the final season. So make sure to get out and vote this year and get those people into the hall that belong into the hall before there's not a chance to do so. Joe Piscopo might be one of those people. I don't know. Are you a Piscopo guy? Are you a Piscopo person? Are you a Piscopo woman? I don't know. For me, I think I laid it out pretty clearly off the top when I said I think, he at the very least deserves a nod for helping. Again, there's so many instances where the show has been saved, but if we go back to the narrative that Eddie helped save the show, then Joe is inexorably linked to Eddie Murphy. And, while Eddie was a tour de force on his own, the sketches that he did with Mr. Piscopo, were always elevated. And one of those sketches I first became aware of during the SNL 15th anniversary, way back when they did a special. And I thought it was just hysterical. And it showcases Piscopo's Sinatra, but it also showcases the relationship he has with Eddie. So let's not dilly-dally any longer and get right to this sketch featuring both Eddie Murphy and our nominee, Joe Piscopo.
Well, everything's ready. We're all set to record as soon as he gets here, Mr. Sinatra.
Good. Son, come here. How does the album sound so far?
Oh, it's excellent, Mr. Sinatra.
Thank you. That's very nice. I want to do some tunes that the young people will enjoy. That's why I'm calling this album Frank Sings Tunes the Young People Will Enjoy.
Excuse me, Mr. Sinatra, sir? He's here?
Show him in.
Yes, sir.
Stevie Wonder, you are aptly named. Like I said many times, you are truly a wonder.
Thanks a lot, Frank.
Let me ask you something. Do you do your own hair?
No, I don't.
Then you got no excuse. Little joke, Stevie, looks great. Come on over here to the piano. It's right in front of you, my friend. You're right there. There you go.
Fine. You know, Frank, I feel it is a tremendous honor to be recording with you.
Thank you, Stevie. I feel the same. I'm very much into that tune you do with the Beatle kid. What's his name? The one that looks like a broad?
His name's Paul McCartney, Frank.
Yeah, that's the dude. Would you be so kind as to run down that song for me, Stevie, please?
Ebony and ivory live together in perfect harmony, side by side.
Stevie, hold on, Stevie. Now, something tells me that this is more than a song about playing the piano.
Frank, it's about racial equality and unity of all people.
Well, I don't understand. When I think Ebony, I think of a magazine that most people do not buy. And when I think of Ivory, I think of a soap that floats.
Ebony and Ivory are the black and white keys on the piano, Frank.
All right, Stevie, I know that. You know that. But it's too artsy for the public, capiche? No, I talked to the master, Sammy Kahn, and Sammy is a marvelous songwriter. No offense, Steve. And Sammy thinks we should go with something like chocolate and vanilla. Or how about this? Life is an Eskimo pie. Why don't we take a bite?
Yeah. I'm afraid that might be a bit offensive to some people.
Hey, who cares what the Eskimos think? They don't buy records, huh? Okay, Steve. Let's see. Ebony and Ivory, huh? Ebony and Ivory. Hey, Stevie, what the hell are we beating around the bush for? This is 1982. Let's get right to the point, huh? Here, take it from the tops. Swing it, Stevie, with a bounce, baby. You are black. I am white. Life's an Eskimo pie. Let's take a bite. That was groovy thinking, Lincoln, when you set them free. We all know cats are the same, Maine to Mexico. Good, bad guys and chicks.
I am dark and you are light.
You are blind as a bat and I have sight. Side by side you are my amigo. Negro, let's not fight.
Ebony and Ivory, just living in perfect harmony.
We're talking salt and pepper, Sammy and Dean, Stevie and me are peachy keen.
You are white.
You are black. And who cares? Who cares, baby?
I told you that's a great sketch. It's, could you do it now? Yeah, I think you could, because the turn at the end with Sinatra basically saying, who cares? sort of lets him off the hook for some of the more colorful comments to, use a pun, I suppose, in the sketch. So yeah, I think it holds up. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's a great parody as well. As somebody who writes a lot of song parodies, I got to tell you, I know my parodies. Next week, we have a hell of a show for you. We are going to take a look at the bona fides of Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Will she make it in as a host? Tune in to find out when we're joined again by the returning Kalina Steckel. Should be a good one. I really want to thank our guests this week, Robin Duke. You can look for her book and the tour of her stage show, Women Fully Clothed. And there is no show without our friends Matt and Thomas, so big thanks to them. And of course, to you for listening. But I have one more favor to ask you. If you would, on your way out of the hall, as you pass the Weekend Update exhibit, turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNLHOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
Podcasts and such.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But DC politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.